Professor James Matthews was not easily impressed. With 25 years of experience as a mathematician at Cambridge University, his world revolved around numbers, patterns, and undeniable logic. An atheist since the age of 16, he had dedicated his career to proving that everything in the universe could be explained mathematically, without the need for any supernatural forces. "I never believed in religious texts," he said in an interview with Science Today. "To me, they are nothing more than products of ancient human thought, an attempt to explain the world before proper scientific methods were developed. Religion was a primitive way of understanding reality, which has now been replaced by science." Matthews was born and raised in an academic environment. His father was a physics professor, and his mother a molecular biology researcher. He grew up firmly convinced that science was the only path to truth. At school, he constantly challenged his religious studies teachers, demanding empirical evidence for any supernatural claims. "I still remember when I was 12, I challenged my religion teacher to prove the existence of God," he recalled with a smile. "Her only reply was that some things must be accepted on faith. For my analytical mind, that was a completely unsatisfactory answer." However, all the beliefs he had built over decades began to falter when one of his Muslim classmates asked him a simple question that would forever change his life. That day, during a lecture on advanced probability theory at Cambridge University, the atmosphere was typical. Matthews was explaining a complex concept when a student named Zachariah raised his hand. "Professor Matthews, may I ask a question slightly off topic?" Zachariah asked politely. Matthews, known for enjoying intellectual debates, nodded. "Professor, if you found a mathematical pattern in an ancient text that couldn't have been created by people 1,400 years ago, would that make you question its origin?" the student asked calmly. Matthews smiled condescendingly, as he often did when faced with what he considered naive questions. Adjusting his glasses, he replied, "Of course, but such patterns don't exist. You can find mathematical coincidences in any book, even the oldest ones, if you search long enough. The human brain is wired to find patterns, even in random data. That's why we see faces in clouds or constellations in stars." "What about the Quran, Professor? Have you ever analyzed it mathematically?" Zachariah asked again. "No, I haven't," Matthews replied. "But I'd bet the results would be the same, statistical coincidences that can be explained by probability laws." Zachariah smiled. "Maybe you should try, Professor. Aren't we scientists supposed to test hypotheses before drawing conclusions?" This challenge sparked Matthews' curiosity. As someone devoted to the scientific method, he felt compelled to prove his point. He set out to demonstrate that the Quran, like any other text, held no special mathematical structure, just illusions perceived by those wanting to see them. He had no idea what he was about to discover. Matthews' computational lab at Cambridge was filled with high-performance computers and whiteboards covered in complex equations. It was there that he began what he thought would be a simple exercise, to prove that there was nothing remarkable about the Quran's mathematical structure. "When I started, I was 100% sure I'd find random patterns," Matthews said. "That always happens when we analyze texts deeply enough. Our minds are wired to find meaning, even in chaos." Matthews applied a systematic approach. He developed special computer algorithms to analyze the Quran in its original Arabic. His goal was simple: to find random patterns that would show the claims of a mathematical code were merely statistical coincidences. With the help of his colleague Dr. Sarah Thompson, an expert in computational linguistics, they created software that could count frequencies of words, letters, and phrases in the Quran. The program also analyzed more complex structures, such as gematria, numerical values of Arabic letters, and the positioning of specific words. However, instead of randomness, the computers began to reveal something entirely different. The patterns that emerged were so structured that Matthews initially thought there was a bug in the algorithm. "I thought our program had a mistake," Thompson recalled. "The results were too regular, too structured. It made no statistical sense." After thoroughly checking the program and finding no errors, Matthews and Thompson began analyzing the results. What stood out most was the recurring appearance of the number 19 in the Quran structure. The number 19 appeared so often that it defied statistical logic. For instance, the Basmala, the opening phrase, Bismillah ir-Rahman ir-Rahim, which begins 113 of the 114 chapters, consists of exactly 19 Arabic letters. The word Allah appears in the Quran 19,368 times, which is divisible by 19. The word Rahman, the merciful, appears 57 times, also divisible by 19. The number of words between the first and last mention of Allah in the Quran is 19,440. Dr. Thompson, who had been even more skeptical than Matthews, conducted her own independent analysis. I was convinced James had made a mistake in his methodology, she said. So I built my own algorithm from scratch. To my surprise, I found the same patterns, and even discovered additional ones. As a computational linguist, I've analyzed texts from all major civilizations and eras, Dr. Thompson explained. The degree of mathematical structure in the Quran is unlike anything I've ever seen. They applied the same analytical methods to other religious and secular texts from the same period, but found nothing similar. One or two coincidences I could accept, Matthews said, but dozens of interconnected patterns? The probability of that happening by chance is practically zero. Matthews then developed additional statistical tests to analyze the likelihood of all these patterns appearing randomly in a text. The probability of all these patterns appearing by chance in a text the size of the Quran is less than 1 in a trillion, he explained. As a mathematician, I couldn't ignore that number. It's like flipping a coin and getting heads 50 times in a row. Theoretically possible, but extremely unlikely under natural conditions. The deeper Matthews dug, the more patterns he found, and the more astonishing they became. The Quran consists of 114 surahs, a number divisible by 19. The total number of verses in the Quran is 6,236. When added to the number of surahs, 114, the sum is 6,350, again divisible by 19. The first chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha, consists of 7 verses, and when the numerical values, al-shari, of the first word of each verse are added up, the total is a multiple of 19. The number 19 itself is mentioned in the Quran only once, in chapter 74, verse 30. Over it are 19. If you add 74 and 30, you get 104, and 104 plus 19 is equal to 123, a number also divisible by 19. 123 divided by 19 is equal to 6.47. When Matthews presented his findings to the mathematics department, reactions were mixed. Some colleagues were skeptical, some intrigued, and others visibly uncomfortable with what the discovery might imply. Professor Richard Dawkins, a well-known atheist and Matthews colleague, challenged him. James, you know very well that if you look hard enough, you can find any pattern in any data set. This is just apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in randomness. Matthews nodded in understanding. Richard, that was the first objection I raised myself. But this isn't just about finding a few random patterns. This is a structured system, integrated throughout the entire text. These patterns are interconnected and consistent. More importantly, I applied the same methodology to other ancient texts, the Vedas, the Mahabharata, even the Bible, and none of them revealed a consistent mathematical structure like this. Dr. Emma Chen, a statistical analyst, raised another concern. Have you considered the possibility of selection bias? That maybe you're only including the patterns that support your hypothesis and ignoring the ones that don't. That's a valid point, Matthews responded. To address that, we developed a double-blind testing protocol where my team analyzed texts without knowing which was which. We included the Quran alongside other texts from the same period. The results were consistent. Only the Quran displayed these integrated numerical patterns. Matthews spent 3 more months analyzing every aspect of the Quran's numerical structure. He tested and retuned algorithms, searching for alternative explanations. He even invited skeptics and critics to review his methodology to ensure there was no bias or error. As a skeptic, my job is to seek rational explanations, he explained. But the more I looked, the clearer it became that these patterns were too complex, too consistent, and too structured to have appeared by chance. In the weeks following his initial discovery, Matthews experienced what he described as an intense internal struggle. As a scientist who had always based his beliefs on empirical evidence, he now faced evidence that challenged everything he thought he knew. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking about the implications of what I had found. If the Quran really contains a mathematical structure that no human could have created 1,400 years ago, then what does that mean? Does it imply the existence of a higher power? Does it mean that God exists?" At that moment, Matthews faced an intellectual crisis. His entire worldview had been based on the idea that everything could be explained without God. But here, in the undeniable numbers of his own field, he had found evidence pointing in another direction. In his turmoil, Matthews decided to take a break from his research. He took a leave of absence from the university and traveled to the Scottish Highlands to clear his mind. In the silence of the mountains, he began reading the Quran, not as a mathematical object, but to understand its message. "I was surprised to find that the Quran repeatedly calls on people to use their intellect, to contemplate the universe, and to seek knowledge," he said. "That was very different from what I had expected from a religious text." One passage struck him particularly deeply. "We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth." Quran 41:53. As a scientist, I've always sought signs, evidence, in the natural world, Matthews reflected. And here was a text telling me to do exactly that. But it also suggested that these signs point to something beyond the material. Upon returning to Cambridge, Matthews resumed his research with a new perspective. This time, he focused not only on the Quran's mathematical structure, but also sought connections between the patterns he had discovered and natural phenomena, something that made his findings even more astonishing. Matthews also added that the Quran was revealed gradually over a period of 23 years. How could someone plan such a complex mathematical structure in a text that was revealed in parts over more than 2 decades, without access to computational tools? He asked. Matthews also traced the history of mathematics and found that the numerical patterns in the Quran could not have been known to people in the 6th century. The numeral system we use today, the decimal system based on 10, was not known in Arabia at that time, he explained. The concept of zero, which is fundamental in modern mathematics, was only introduced into the Arab world several centuries after the Quran appeared. So how could someone have created such an intricate mathematical structure without these basic mathematical tools? Considering that Muhammad, the prophet who brought the Quran, was illiterate, the discovery becomes even more astonishing. "We used high-performance computers and complex algorithms to find these patterns," Matthews said. Imagining a 6th century person creating such a structure without modern technology seems impossible. Dr. Lawrence Peterson, a longtime colleague of Matthews, asked after the presentation, "James, why are you abandoning decades of rational thinking because of a few numerical oddities in an ancient text?" "These are not oddities, Lawrence," Matthews calmly replied. "These are statistically significant patterns that cannot be explained by our current understanding. Isn't that the very task of science, to explore phenomena that we cannot yet explain? But why jump to supernatural explanations?" Peterson insisted. "I'm not jumping anywhere," Matthews replied. "I'm following the evidence, step by step, as a scientist. If we find data that doesn't fit our current models, we don't reject the data, we revise the models." Matthews' transformation didn't happen overnight. As a scientist, he spent weeks deeply studying not only the mathematical structure of the Quran but also its teachings. "I found that the Quran consistently encourages the use of reason, observation, and reflection. The same values I've always upheld as a scientist," he noted. "There are more than 800 verses in the Quran that urge people to think, reflect, and seek knowledge." Matthews was also surprised to find verses that describe natural phenomena with scientific precision, such as human embryology, the expansion of the universe, and the layers of the atmosphere. How could a book written in the 6th century contain scientific information that has only been confirmed in modern times? He asked. This only deepened the mystery surrounding the Quran's origin. During his research, Matthews began engaging with the Muslim community. He attended lectures at Islamic centers, spoke with scholars, and even started learning Arabic to better understand the Quran. I met many Muslim scholars and academics who, like me, valued critical thinking and evidence-based inquiry, he said. They helped me understand that in Islam, faith and science are not at odds. Both are means to discover truth. In the end, the irrefutable mathematical evidence, combined with the message of the Quran that resonated in his heart, led Matthews to an unexpected conclusion. I could no longer ignore the evidence, he said. As a mathematician who has always searched for truth in numbers, I had to acknowledge that the Quran could not have been written by humans 1,400 years ago. Its mathematical structure is too perfect, too complex. On March 19th, symbolically, and in front of a stunned academic community, Professor James Matthews declared the Shahada and officially embraced Islam. Today I stand before you not only as a mathematician but as a man who found truth through research, he said at a faculty gathering. Ironically, the same knowledge I once used to deny God has become the path that led me to him. The academic community's reaction was mixed. Some colleagues respected his decision, while others felt he had betrayed scientific principles. Dr. Jennifer Wilder, head of the physics department, expressed her disappointment. James was one of our brightest minds. To see him fall into religious thinking, it's a great loss for rational inquiry. On the other hand, respected neurologist Dr. Michael Thompson had a different view. Science doesn't have all the answers yet, and maybe it never will. Matthews simply followed the evidence wherever it led him. Isn't that what we should all do as scientists? I understand the skepticism, Matthews responded to the criticism. If someone had come to me 2 years ago with a story like this, I would have laughed. But all I can say is, conduct your own research, look at the data. As scientists, we must follow the evidence, not our biases. Matthews began writing a book about his discoveries titled The Mathematical Miracle: How Numbers Led an Atheist to God. He also launched a new course at the university on the intersection of mathematics and ancient texts, which quickly became the most popular on the faculty. Students from all backgrounds, believers and non-believers, eagerly joined the course to examine the evidence. I don't ask my students to come to the same conclusions I did, Matthews explains. I only ask them to approach the data with an open mind and rigorous methodology. Matthews' story has sparked wide discussion in the global scientific community. Dr. Elizabeth Chun, a researcher at MIT, commented, "Professor Matthews' discoveries are intriguing. As scientists, we must be open to all possibilities, even those that challenge our worldview." Meanwhile, critics like Dr. Robert Heitz of Stanford remain skeptical. Mathematical patterns can be found anywhere if you look hard enough. That doesn't prove divine origin. Matthews responded to the criticism calmly. I invite all skeptics to examine my methodology and replicate my research. Science advances through questions and challenges. I'm not asking anyone to reach the same conclusions, only to investigate with an open mind. Today, Professor Matthews continues to teach mathematics at Cambridge, but now also lectures on the mathematical miracles of the Quran at top universities around the world. His research has brought a fresh perspective to the dialogue between science and religion. Numbers don't lie, he simply says, and the numbers in the Quran speak very clearly to those willing to listen. Matthews' transformation, from a renowned atheist to a believing Muslim, shows that honest intellectual inquiry can lead to unexpected results. What I found in the mathematics of the Quran is not just numerical patterns, he reflects. It's a doorway into an entirely new dimension of understanding. It reminds us that the universe may contain more than our current scientific models can explain. Now, Matthews devotes his life not only to mathematics but also to building bridges of understanding between the world of science and the world of spirituality. He believes that, when approached correctly, these two spheres need never be in conflict. After all, he says, both science and faith are searches for truth, and truth, in all its forms, always leads to the same source.